Emma Collins was the kind of woman who carried calm power. At 35, she had worked her way up from an intern to the head of marketing at one of New York's top firms. Her confidence, sharp mind, and quiet charm made her respected by everyone who knew her. But beneath that polished image was a woman who often stayed late at the office, staring at the city lights, wondering if success had cost her something she could never get back: warmth, love, connection. When Lucas Hayes walked into her office on his first day, something shifted. He was 25, polite, thoughtful, and surprisingly composed for someone new. He wore a simple shirt, sleeves rolled up, with a kind of relaxed energy that made people comfortable. Emma noticed the sincerity in his eyes the moment he introduced himself. "I'm Lucas," he said, offering his hand. "It's an honor to work under you." She smiled, professional as always. "Welcome to the team, Lucas. I hope you're ready for long hours and fast deadlines." "I'm ready for both," he replied with a small grin. There was something about his tone, not arrogant, not nervous, just real. The days passed quickly after that. Lucas proved to be more than capable. He paid attention, learned fast, and spoke with ideas that impressed even the senior team. Emma found herself looking forward to his updates during meetings, admiring his quiet confidence and the way he stayed calm even under pressure. He wasn't trying to impress anyone, he just cared about doing things right. One evening, the office was nearly empty. The faint sound of rain brushed against the tall windows, turning the city outside into a blur of golden lights. Emma was at her desk, surrounded by papers, reviewing campaign reports. She didn't even notice when Lucas appeared at her door, holding a folder. "Hey," he said softly. "I finished revising the campaign pitch. I think this version fits your notes better." Emma looked up, surprised. "You're still here. It's past 8. He shrugged lightly. "I wanted to make sure it was done before tomorrow. You've put so much work into this, I didn't want to let you down." She took the folder from his hand. Their fingers brushed for a moment, nothing more than a second, but it was enough to make her heart skip unexpectedly. She quickly looked down at the file, hiding her reaction. "You didn't have to stay this late, Lucas." "I don't mind," he said, stepping back slightly. "It feels good to be trusted with something real." Emma looked at him again. His expression was calm, open, without any hint of expectation or nervousness. Just honest effort. For a moment, she saw a version of herself years ago, hungry to prove her worth. Eager to belong, she smiled, softer this time. "You remind me of myself when I started here." He chuckled quietly. "Then I guess I'm on the right track." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was peaceful. The sound of rain, the hum of the office lights, and the soft glow of the computer screens made everything feel calm, almost cinematic. Emma didn't say anything more, but she felt something stir, a strange warmth she hadn't felt in years. That night, when she finally packed up to leave, she saw Lucas still at his desk, typing something with deep focus. She paused by the door for a moment, watching him. There was a kind of determination in the way he worked, patient, steady, almost graceful. She found herself smiling again without meaning to. "Good night, Lucas," she said softly. He looked up, surprised but pleased. "Good night, Emma." She stepped out into the hallway. She caught her reflection in the glass. There was a small spark in her eyes, a quiet reminder that maybe, just maybe, life still had room for moments that weren't about deadlines or presentations. The next morning, things returned to normal. Meetings, phone calls, presentations, the usual rhythm of work. But whenever Emma passed Lucas's desk, there was a silent acknowledgement between them. A nod, a half smile, a quiet energy that neither of them could quite define. One afternoon, during a team discussion, Lucas offered an idea that took everyone by surprise. "What if we build the campaign around people's emotions instead of the product?" He said confidently. "It's not about selling, it's about connection." The room went quiet for a moment. Then Emma spoke, smiling slightly. "That's exactly what this project needs." After the meeting, as everyone left the room, Lucas lingered behind. "Thank you," he said, adjusting his papers. "For what?" She asked. "For listening." Most people wouldn't have taken that idea seriously coming from an intern. Emma looked at him, her expression thoughtful. Ideas don't care about titles. The right one deserves to be heard. Their eyes met again, steady, genuine. There was respect there, but also something deeper. Something neither of them fully understood yet. That evening, when Emma returned to her office, she found a sticky note on her desk. It wasn't signed, but she knew who it was from. It read, "Thank you for believing in me." Luce held the note for a while, then placed it inside her drawer with a quiet smile. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't unprofessional. It was something in between human. Over the next few days, Emma noticed small things she hadn't before. The way Lucas stayed late without complaint. How he listened carefully when others spoke. How he never interrupted. How he asked for advice not out of insecurity, but genuine curiosity. And maybe it was the long hours or the constant late nights. But Emma began to feel something shift inside her. A feeling of comfort she didn't expect. Lucas wasn't just her intern anymore. He had become someone who brought warmth into her days without even trying. She didn't tell anyone, of course. She kept her professionalism intact, but when Lucas entered her office, her tone softened just slightly. Their conversations carried small sparks of humor. Sometimes even personal stories slipped through. One night, as she left the building, she caught a glimpse of Lucas standing outside in the light drizzle waiting for his bus. She hesitated for a moment, then called out, "Do you need a ride?" He looked up, surprised. "Are you sure?" "It's late," she said simply. "Come on." Okay. During the drive, they talked about everything except work, music, favorite movies, childhood dreams. It was easy, effortless. The kind of connection that didn't need to be forced when he got out of the car. He smiled and said, "Thank you, Emma. I owe you one." She smiled back. "Just keep doing what you're doing. That's thanks enough." That night, when she reached home, she sat quietly on her couch, thinking about how strange life could be, how unexpected people could walk into your world and change its rhythm without even meaning to. Emma didn't know where this feeling was leading, or if it was even supposed to lead anywhere. But for the first time in a long while, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, alive. And as the rain continued to fall outside her window, she whispered to herself, almost smiling, "Maybe connections aren't mistakes. Maybe they're reminders." That thought stayed with her, and she had no idea it was only the beginning. After that rainy night, the rhythm of the office began to change in quiet, unspoken ways. Emma and Lucas didn't talk about what was happening between them. Maybe because there was nothing to define. Or maybe because it was too delicate to name. But from the way their eyes met during meetings, to the way they lingered near each other a little longer than necessary, it was clear that something gentle but powerful was growing. Emma, known for her strict focus, started finding small excuses to work with Lucas. She'd ask him to stay for final reviews, to help her proofread presentations, or to discuss new ideas. Nobody thought twice about it. After all, she was his supervisor, but for Emma, these moments had started to feel like more than work. One evening, long after most of the team had gone home, Emma sat at her desk, surrounded by the soft glow of the desk lamp. The air was quiet, filled only with the sound of tapping keys. Lucas walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You've been at it for hours," he said, setting one beside her. She looked up, slightly startled but smiling. "You didn't have to." "I know," he said simply, "but you always forget to take breaks." Emma took the cup and inhaled the comforting aroma. "You notice too much?" she said lightly. He chuckled. "That's part of my job, isn't it?" They shared a smile, one of those soft, accidental ones that stays longer than it should. Then they went back to work, the air between them calm but charged with quiet energy. As the weeks went by, their late nights became routine. They'd sit across from each other, trading ideas and laughter between moments of silence. Sometimes their conversations drifted beyond work. Small personal things like favorite books, old memories, little regrets. One night, Lucas said something that caught Emma off guard. "You ever feel like your job takes all the space that love is supposed to have?" She froze for a second. It was such a simple question, yet it hit something deep inside her. Every day, she admitted softly, looking at the glowing skyline outside. You give so much to your career that you forget what you were supposed to be doing it for. Lucas nodded. I get that. My dad always said success means nothing if you have no one to share it with. There was a pause, not uncomfortable, but heavy with unspoken emotion. Emma turned toward him, studying his face under the soft light. You're wiser than your age, she said quietly. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Or maybe I've just seen enough to know what I don't want to become. That night, when Lucas finally packed up to leave, he hesitated by the door. Good night, Emma, he said. She looked up. Good night, Lucas. But after he left, she sat there for a while, staring at the empty doorway. Something about that moment lingered, the kind of moment that doesn't ask for attention but refuses to fade. Over the next few days, Emma found herself thinking about Lucas more often. She'd catch herself smiling at his jokes or listening a little too closely when he spoke. It wasn't unprofessional. She respected him deeply, but it was undeniable that her feelings were growing into something she couldn't quite explain. She tried to remind herself that she was his boss, that feelings like this had no place in her world. But feelings, she learned, don't always ask for permission. One evening, during a heavy rainstorm, everyone had left early, everyone except her and Lucas. The thunder outside echoed softly through the glass walls. They sat side by side reviewing final edits for the upcoming presentation. Emma's concentration was slipping. Every time he leaned over to point something out. His closeness made her heart react in ways she didn't expect. At one point, Lucas laughed quietly at one of her sarcastic remarks. His laugh was warm, genuine, and it made her smile without even realizing it. For a moment, everything outside the room, the rain, the deadlines, the expectations disappeared. When the project was finally complete, Emma leaned back in her chair, exhausted but relieved. You've done great work, she said sincerely. Thanks to you, he replied. No, she said, shaking her head, thanks to your talent. He looked at her, and for a few seconds, neither of them spoke. There was something fragile in the air. Like both of them knew they were standing at the edge of something that could change everything. Lucas finally broke the silence. You know, Emma, he said softly, you don't have to carry everything alone. You have people who care. She looked at him, caught off guard. Who says I'm carrying anything? He smiled gently. I can see it. You hide it well, but you don't fool me. His honesty left her speechless. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not in years. She was used to being admired for her strength, not seen for her vulnerability. But Lucas saw through the walls she had built, and somehow that scared her more than anything. That night, after he left, Emma sat by the window watching the rain. Her reflection in the glass looked calm, but inside she felt a quiet storm. She didn't know if it was wrong to care for someone she worked with, or if what she felt even counted as that. All she knew was that Lucas had begun to occupy a space in her mind she couldn't ignore. The next morning, she tried to keep things professional. Meetings, reports, deadlines, everything as it should be. But when Lucas smiled at her during the morning briefing, her heart betrayed her composure for just a moment. That evening, as the office emptied, Lucas walked by her door. Heading out? He asked. In a bit, she said. Still have a few things to finish? He hesitated, then said, don't stay too late. You need rest too. His tone was simple, but it carried care, something she hadn't heard in a long time. After he left, she whispered into the quiet, you're making this harder than it should be. Days turned into weeks. The campaign they worked on together became one of the company's best. The senior management praised Emma's leadership, and she made sure Lucas got the credit he deserved. He was no longer just the intern. He had become the rising voice in her team. One afternoon, after a successful presentation, the entire department celebrated. Amid the laughter and chatter, Lucas walked up to Emma and said quietly, we did it. She smiled. Yes, we did. The words lingered longer than they should have. That evening, when everyone left, Emma stood in her office. thinking about the strange bond they'd built, one formed through long hours, laughter, and understanding. It wasn't physical, but it was real. It was something that grew in silence, between coffee cups and shared glances, in the space between duty and desire. And as she turned off the office lights, she realized the truth. She wasn't falling for her intern because of attraction or excitement. She was falling because he had reminded her of something she thought she'd lost the ability to feel seen, to be understood, to be human again. What neither of them knew was that their next quiet evening together would test the boundaries of that connection and change everything that followed. The days following the campaign's success were filled with praise and celebration. The company was proud, clients were happy, and Emma's leadership was once again proven. But even in that excitement, she couldn't ignore how her eyes kept finding Lucas. He was growing into his role, confident, calm, and focused. But there was something else in his glances lately, something that lingered just a second longer than it used to. Emma tried to convince herself that she was imagining it, that her feelings were just a result of late nights and emotional exhaustion. Yet every time Lucas walked into her office, her heart reacted before her mind could remind her of the rules. One Friday evening, the office had emptied early for the weekend. The sky outside had turned orange and soft gray, and the city below buzzed quietly in the distance. Emma stayed behind to polish the final presentation slides for an upcoming pitch. She didn't expect anyone else to be there, but soon she heard a familiar knock. "Still working?" Lucas asked, leaning slightly against the doorframe. Holding 2 cups of coffee, Emma looked up, a bit surprised but smiling. "You, again. You don't know how to rest, do you?" "Neither do you," he said, handing her a cup. "So I thought we could both pretend to." She took the coffee and shook her head lightly. "You'll regret staying late on a Friday." He smiled. "Not if I'm learning something useful." They sat side by side, reviewing slides and notes, their laughter and conversation filling the quiet office. The glow of the desk lamp cast soft shadows across the room and outside. The city lights flickered like stars scattered between buildings. The air felt calm, safe, the kind of atmosphere that makes time move slower. As Lucas leaned over to point at something on her screen, his hand brushed against hers, a light. Accidental touch, but enough to make both of them freeze. Neither moved for a moment. The sound of the air conditioner and the faint city noise filled the silence. Emma could feel her pulse quicken. "Sorry," Lucas murmured, pulling his hand back slightly. "It's fine," she said softly, eyes still on the screen. But her voice wasn't as steady as she wanted it to be. The room felt different after that, not uncomfortable, but charged with unspoken emotion. Every glance, every pause carried meaning. Emma stood up and walked toward the window, needing a moment to breathe. The view of New York stretched out before her, glowing and endless. "You ever think about how small we are compared to all that?" she said quietly. Lucas joined her, standing just a few feet away. "Maybe that's why we chase big dreams," he replied. "So we don't feel invisible." Emma looked at him. The light from the window caught the reflection in his eyes, sincere, open, searching. She wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. "Lucas," she began slowly, "you know, this, whatever's happening, here it's complicated." He nodded. "I know. You're my boss and we both have lines we can't cross." She sighed, turning back to the view. "It's not just about rules. It's about responsibility, about what people will think." "I get that," he said gently. "But I also know when something feels real. And this," he paused, searching for words, "this doesn't feel ordinary." Emma felt a shiver run through her. His words were simple, but they carried truth. She didn't want to admit it, but deep down, she felt the same. It wasn't attraction alone. It was connection. It was the way he understood her silences, the way he noticed the things no one else did. For a long moment, they stood side by side, both staring out at the skyline. Neither of them spoke. They didn't touch, didn't cross any visible line, but emotionally, they had already stepped into something new, something that scared them both. When Emma finally turned back to her desk, Her voice was steady again. "We should finish this presentation." Lucas nodded, quietly following her lead. They worked in silence for the next hour, both pretending to focus while fighting thoughts they couldn't voice. When it was time to leave, Emma shut down her computer and gathered her things. Lucas stood by the door, waiting, as if he didn't want to leave just yet. "You'll be okay getting home?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "I live 5 blocks away. I'll survive." He nodded, but didn't move. The air between them thickened again. Not awkward, but heavy with everything they weren't saying. Finally, Lucas took a step closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Emma, can I ask you something?" She looked up. "What?" "Do you ever wish things were simpler?" The question caught her off guard. "Every day," she said softly. Lucas gave a small, sad smile. "Me too." For a moment, time seemed to pause. She wanted to tell him to forget this, to go back to being her intern, to let things stay safe. But the words wouldn't come, because the truth was she didn't want to forget any of it. "Good night." "Lucas," she said finally. He hesitated, then replied, "Good night, Emma." When he left, she stayed behind, staring at the empty space he'd just stood in. She sat at her desk thinking about everything that had happened. Nothing improper had occurred, but emotionally, something significant had changed. The air still carried his presence, the faint scent of his coffee, the sound of his laugh echoing in her mind. That night, as she walked home, she kept replaying his words. "This doesn't feel ordinary." He was right. It felt like the beginning of something that shouldn't happen but already had, quietly and deeply. When she reached home, she stood by the window, the city stretching endlessly before her. She thought about the lines she'd drawn her whole life, lines of discipline, professionalism, control. For years, she had lived inside them, proud of how steady she remained. But now, one quiet Friday evening, someone had walked into her life and gently blurred those edges. She didn't know what would happen next. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. But as she looked out at the glowing skyline, she whispered to herself, "We didn't cross a line, but I think we both felt it." The next morning, she arrived at work early. The sun was just rising, and the office was still. She stood at her desk, remembering the night before. There was guilt, yes, but also warmth, strange peace she hadn't felt in years. When Lucas arrived, their eyes met briefly. No words were needed. He gave her a polite nod, and she returned it. They both went about their day as if nothing had changed. Yet everything had. And in that quiet understanding, Emma realized something. Sometimes, the most meaningful moments in life are not about what you do, but what you feel and what you choose not to say. They hadn't done anything wrong. They hadn't broken any rules. But in that office, under the soft light and city glow, they had both done something powerful. They had allowed themselves to feel, and though neither of them would ever admit it aloud, that moment in her office would stay with them both, not as a mistake, but as a memory that reminded them of what it means to be human. Monday morning came with the usual rush of emails, calls, and meetings. The office felt normal, alive with energy, but inside Emma's chest was a quiet storm. The weekend hadn't erased anything. Every time she thought of that Friday evening, the silence, the closeness, the things left unsaid, her heart stirred again. She told herself to move on, to keep things professional. But feelings had a strange way of refusing to listen. Lucas walked into her office around 9, holding a file. He looked calm, maybe a little distant, but his eyes still carried the same warmth. The client revisions came in. He said, "Thank you," she replied, forcing her tone to stay neutral. For a few seconds, they both pretended it was just another morning. But underneath, they knew the truth. Nothing about their connection felt ordinary anymore. Over the next few days, work became both a refuge and a reminder. They avoided being alone for too long, speaking mostly about tasks and deadlines. Yet, small details betrayed them, the way he'd linger a moment before leaving her office, or how she'd glance at his empty chair when he wasn't around. Neither of them wanted to admit it. But something deeper had settled quietly between them. Then came the day of the big presentation. It was one of the company's most important pitches, and Emma had chosen Lucas to co-present with her. The team gathered early, nervous but excited. When it was over, the client was thrilled. The project was a success. Everyone congratulated Emma and Lucas, calling them the dream team. As the crowd dispersed, Lucas looked at her and smiled. "We did it." Emma nodded, smiling back. "Yes, we did." Those words, "we did it," echoed in her mind longer than they should have that evening. As the office began to empty, Emma sat alone at her desk reviewing a few last emails. The golden light from the sunset spilled through the windows, painting everything in soft orange. She was about to shut down her computer when there was a gentle knock. "Come in," she said, already knowing who it was. Lucas stepped inside, holding a folder, but not looking at it. "I just wanted to say thank you for trusting me with this project. You didn't have to, but you did." Emma smiled faintly. "You earned it, Lucas. You're talented. You have a good future ahead." He nodded, hesitating as if searching for words. Still, he said softly, "You believed in me when I barely believed in myself. That meant something." She looked at him, her heart tightening. She wanted to keep it simple, to end the conversation before it became something else. But his sincerity disarmed her. "You remind me why I love what I do," she said quietly. "Not because of the work, but because of people like you, people who care." For a moment, the room was silent again. The same kind of silence that had filled it on that Friday evening. Warm, heavy, meaningful. Lucas took a slow breath. "Emma," he said, "I know this is complicated, but what we did, even if it was nothing more than a moment, it changed me." She froze. "Lucas, I'm not saying it was wrong," he interrupted gently. "We didn't cross any line. But you made me see something I'd forgotten, that real connection still exists. And that's rare." Emma looked away, trying to steady her thoughts. "You're young," she said softly. "You'll have so many chances to feel things like this again. Don't mistake admiration for something else." He smiled sadly. "Maybe, but it doesn't make this any less real." Her throat tightened. She wasn't sure if she wanted to argue or agree. What he said was simple, but the truth in it hit deep. She had spent years building walls, protecting herself from disappointment, from risk, from feeling too much. And now, here was this young man, reminding her what it was like to feel alive again. "Lucas, shh," she said after a pause, "you're going to do incredible things. But we can't let this turn into something it shouldn't be." He nodded slowly. "I know." He hesitated before adding, "But even if nothing happens, I'll never forget what this meant." There was a long silence, the kind that felt final but gentle. Emma's eyes softened. "Neither will I." He took a step back, placing the folder on her desk. "They offered me a position in another department," he said. "I'll be starting there next week." Emma's heart sank slightly, though she'd known this day would come. "That's great news," she said, forcing a smile. "You deserve it." "Thank you," he said quietly, "and thank you for everything." He turned to leave, but just before reaching the door, he stopped. "Emma," he said, without turning around, "what we did, it wasn't about breaking rules. It was about remembering what it means to care again." She didn't answer. She couldn't. When the door finally closed behind him, Emma sat in silence. Her eyes fell on the desk, the empty coffee cup he had brought her earlier. The folder he left behind, the faint scent of his cologne still lingering in the air. Everything felt heavier than it should have. She leaned back in her chair and let out a long breath. What they had shared wasn't love, not really. It wasn't romance in the usual sense either. It was something quieter, a connection born out of understanding, timing, and two lonely hearts that found comfort in each other's presence. That evening, as she left the building, the city lights shimmered like reflections of her thoughts. She walked slowly, her heels clicking softly against the pavement, the cool breeze brushing her face. Every step away from that office felt like leaving behind a small piece of something she couldn't name. When she reached home, she placed her phone on the counter and stared at her reflection in the mirror. For the first time in years, She didn't see just the boss or the leader. She saw a woman who had felt something real later that night. She opened her laptop to finish one last report. As she typed, a message notification appeared on her screen. It was from Lucas. Only 2 words, "Thank you." She smiled faintly. No explanation, no promises, just gratitude. And that was enough. The next morning, when she walked into the office, his desk was empty. A small note rested on her keyboard. It read, "You once said ideas don't care about titles. Maybe that's true for feelings too. Take care, Emma." She folded the note carefully and placed it inside her drawer beside the old sticky note he had once left her months ago. From that day on, Emma threw herself back into work. She led new campaigns, trained new interns, and kept her calm professionalism intact. But every so often, when the office was quiet and the city lights shimmered through the glass, she'd pause and remember that moment by the window. When words weren't needed, when she and Lucas stood side by side, feeling something that neither of them could ever fully explain. She realized then that what they did wasn't about crossing boundaries. It was about opening a door to a forgotten part of themselves, the part that still believed in connection, in kindness, in something deeper than the everyday noise of life. And though time would move on, and people would come and go, that memory would always stay, not as a secret, but as a quiet reminder that sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones that never truly begin. Emma closed her office door that evening, looked out at the city skyline, and whispered, "Thank you, Lucas, for reminding me what it feels like to feel